My daughter set fire to the only thing her father loved more than life, a Shelby Cobra 427 from 1965. And she did it the night I told her she couldn't have the lakeside condo. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, smelling the smoke and wondering if this was still the girl I raised. But what she didn't know was that Raymond had left behind something far more powerful than a car. I had just finished sweeping the fallen leaves off the back porch when I caught a glimpse of sunlight hitting the polished chrome of Raymond's Shelby Cobra 427, parked exactly where he left it. Right there, under the old maple tree we planted in our first year of marriage. It always made the driveway feel like a shrine, quiet, untouched, sacred. I didn't drive the car, not once since he passed, but I kept it clean. I'd polish the hood once a week, change the oil every 3 months like clockwork. Some people thought I was being sentimental. Maybe I was. But it wasn't just a car. It was him. The way he'd turn the key, tilt his head back, and smile. That's what I kept alive. That morning, the lake was calm, a kind of soft grey glass. The smell of pine and dew still lingered in the air. And then I heard her voice. "Mom, you really should think about downsizing. This place is too much for you." I turned and saw Brittany standing in the kitchen doorway, holding her to-go latte like she owned the place. She hadn't even knocked. Her daughter, Lacey, 12 and already taller than me, was scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. "I wasn't expecting you," I said. She smiled like I'd just told her a joke. "Thought we'd surprise you. Lacey wanted to see the lake." But I knew Brittany. She never just came over. We sat on the patio. She barely looked at the lake. "Mum, I've been thinking. That condo by the marina? It's just sitting there. You know I've been trying to get out of that awful apartment in the city." I nodded but said nothing. I'd heard this pitch before. "You don't even use it anymore. Why not just transfer the deed to me now? I mean, it'll be mine eventually anyway." She said it like it was already decided, like Raymond hadn't poured his entire life into making sure his assets were handled the right way. "I'm not ready to talk about that," I told her. She leaned back, looked up at the tree like the conversation bored her. "It's just a condo, Mom, not your soul." That stung more than I expected. I got up and walked over to the car. I didn't say anything, just brushed a leaf off the hood. I knew she was watching me. "You still baby that thing, huh?" she called out. "Dad's ghost in a metal box." I turned slowly and met her eyes. For the first time in a long while, I saw a crack, not in her voice, but in her face. Bitterness, or maybe envy. I couldn't tell. "Raymond loved this car," I said. "He rebuilt every inch of it by hand, every Sunday for 3 years. You were just a kid. You don't remember." She crossed her arms. "I remember plenty. Like how he let me sit in the back seat once and then yelled at me for touching the clutch. I remember how he'd take that thing for a drive every weekend and leave me behind." That's when I understood. It was never about the condo. Not really. I opened the garage and rolled the Shelby inside. Gently, like I was laying it to rest. When I came back out, she was already packing up to leave. Lacey didn't say goodbye, just walked past me like I wasn't even there. And Brittany, with her hand on the door, gave me a smile I hadn't seen since she was 17. Sweet, but with something else behind it. "I'll see you soon," she said. I nodded, even though something in my chest tightened. Because that smile didn't feel like a daughter's, it felt like a plan. The next time Brittany showed up, it was a Wednesday. No call, no message, just the sound of her car tires grinding up my gravel driveway around 10 in the morning. I watched her from the kitchen window, holding a warm cup of tea, still wearing the cardigan I had slept in. She stepped out, wearing yoga pants and a designer jacket, hair pulled up like she had just finished a workout, but smelled like expensive perfume. Lacey wasn't with her this time. Just Brittany, sunglasses on, lips pressed in a thin line. She walked in like she always did, like it was still her house. She didn't even glance at the lake view or the shelves filled with Raymond's old car manuals. "Thought I'd stop by. Got a meeting in town later," she said, setting her bag down on the entryway bench like she planned to stay a while. I didn't say much. I just nodded and went back to the kitchen. She followed, opened the fridge like it was hers, pulled out a bottle of sparkling water I'd bought last week. As she sat at the island counter, her fingers tapped against the glass. Steady, impatient. "You ever think about listing this place?" she asked, eyes still on her phone. "Listing it?" "The house. You've got 2 floors and a view people would kill for. You could cash out and move into something easier. No stairs, no maintenance. Think about it, Mum. You'd be comfortable." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the sink. At the dishcloth Raymond always folded into perfect thirds. I still folded it that way. She shifted. "Lacey's been having a hard time lately. Her school's been awful and the apartment's not helping. It's cramped, noisy. You know how hard it is raising a kid alone." Her voice softened like honey, but thickened just enough to stick. "I've been looking at a few places closer to the lake. That condo by the marina? It's perfect. And it's already in the family." There it was. Again. I leaned against the counter. "That condo was part of your father's trust. He wanted it preserved." She waved her hand like she was brushing off dust. "Preserved doesn't mean unused. He's gone, Mum. You're here. You get to decide what's practical now." She always said things like that. Short, sharp, coated in concern, but aimed to cut. I stayed quiet, and she changed tactics. "You know I've never asked you for much." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the silence between us was filled with so many old asks, old fights, old resentments we never named. "I just want a place where Lacey can feel safe," she added, "and not feel like a guest in her grandmother's house." That one landed. She knew how to find the soft spot. "I'll think about it," I said, even though I had already decided. She smiled, small and satisfied. Like she had moved the first piece on a board I didn't realize we were playing. Then she asked to use the guest bathroom. I nodded toward the hallway and waited until I heard the door close. I stood there in the kitchen, feeling the warmth drain from my tea. That's when I noticed it. One of the small framed photos on the side table near the window was flipped down. It was a picture of Raymond, standing beside the Shelby Cobra with his arm around me, both of us laughing at something the camera didn't catch. I walked over, lifted it gently, and set it upright again. It felt intentional, not like the wind, not like chance. When she came back, she was all cheer again. Talked about her meeting, her schedule, her new co-worker who was a nightmare. She said it with a smile, but her eyes stayed flat. When she left, she kissed my cheek, just like she used to before college, back when things were still simple. I watched her drive away, and I realized I didn't feel relief. I felt watched, not in the paranoid way, in the quiet, calculated way, like she was keeping track of what I owned, of what I protected. And I knew. This wasn't a casual visit. It was a quiet audition. And I had just failed to play the role she needed me to play. The following Sunday, Jason pulled into the driveway around 7:30 in the morning. His old Chevy rattled like a shopping cart and always made the birds scatter from the tree near the garage. But I liked that sound. It meant someone honest was nearby. Jason wasn't blood, but he had been closer to Raymond than most family. Raymond hired him fresh out of high school to help restore cars at the garage. After Raymond passed, Jason kept checking in every few weeks, mostly to make sure the Cobra stayed in good shape, but also, I think, to keep a piece of Raymond alive. He brought coffee, like always, black for him, hazelnut for me. We sat on the porch steps and looked out at the lake, not saying much for a while. Then he stood up, stretched his arms, and said, "Time to give her a once-over." We opened the garage, and sunlight hit the Shelby's deep navy paint. The car always looked like it had been dipped in midnight. Even after all these years, that shine never dulled. Jason circled it slowly, checked under the hood, listened as I started the engine. He nodded along with the rhythm of it. Then his expression changed. "You hear that?" he said. "Right before the idle evens out?" I listened again. There was a hesitation, barely noticeable. A flutter in the engine like it skipped half a breath before catching itself. "I've kept everything on schedule," I said. "I know you have, but that's not wear and tear." He leaned in closer, hand on the hood. "That's someone tampering. Something's been knocked loose. Probably intentional." The words hit like cold air. I stared at him, waiting for him to brush it off. But he didn't. "Could have happened days ago. Maybe when you weren't looking," he added. I tried to think. The last person to touch the car, besides Jason, was Brittany. But that didn't make sense. She didn't even care about the car. She mocked it, dismissed it. That's what made this feel worse. Jason climbed underneath for a better look. I stood back, arms crossed, palms sweating even though the morning was still cool. He rolled out with grease on his shoulder and a frown carved deep into his face. "Your fuel line clamp was twisted halfway off. That's not age. Someone did that." I didn't have words. I leaned against the workbench just to keep my balance. Jason wiped his hands. "You might want to think about putting a camera in here, even if it's just for peace of mind." I nodded, still silent. He didn't press. That afternoon, I went to visit Tammy. She lived in a small cottage not far from mine, with vines growing over her windows and a wooden porch swing that squeaked every time someone sat down. Tammy had worked with me at the bookstore for over a decade before it closed. She knew more about my family than she probably should, but she never judged, just listened. She poured us sweet tea and raised an eyebrow when she saw my face. "You look like you've swallowed a nail," she said. "I think someone tried to sabotage the car," I told her. She didn't flinch, just nodded slowly, as if she had expected those words to come eventually. "Jason found the fuel line clamp loosened," I said. "He's sure it was deliberate." Tammy sipped her tea and glanced at the lake. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said. "But I saw Brittany last week, down by your dock. Thought she was looking for something, but she ducked behind the shed when she saw me." I clenched my jaw. She didn't mention that visit. "She never mentions the important things," Tammy said. "You want to believe the best in her. I get it. But sometimes we wait so long to see the good that we let the damage keep happening." I sat with her words, heavy but true. Back at home, I walked into the garage again, this time alone. I placed my hand on the Shelby's hood and felt a chill under my palm. The car didn't look damaged. It didn't look violated. But something had shifted. I opened the side cabinet and pulled out an old security camera Raymond had bought years ago but never installed. It still worked. I plugged it in, positioned it high in the corner, and tested the angle. Then I went back into the house and stood in the hallway. That's when I noticed the faint scent of perfume near the guest room. Something floral, but too sharp. Not mine. The guest room door was closed. I opened it. Nothing looked out of place. Bed made. windows closed. But the air felt different, still. I opened the top drawer of the side table and found a napkin folded neatly inside. From the coffee shop Brittany always went to, inside was a receipt for a full tank of gas, not her usual. It wasn't evidence, not really, but it felt like breadcrumbs. Quiet signals left behind by someone who didn't think I'd notice. And maybe I wouldn't have, weeks ago. But now I saw everything a little clearer. There was something under the surface, just a hairline fracture, but enough to spread. And I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't there anymore. The next few days passed slowly, with a weight in the air I couldn't quite name. I kept the garage door locked even during the day and found myself double-checking it before bed. I didn't tell Brittany. I didn't tell anyone else either. I just moved through my routine like nothing had changed, though everything had. That Friday morning, Nicole came by. She was Tammy's niece, just out of college, and had been helping me digitize old photo albums and convert Raymond's workshop manuals into a searchable archive. Raymond had wanted his collection preserved someday, maybe even turned into a resource for younger mechanics. Nicole had the patience and curiosity he would have appreciated. She set up her laptop on the dining table while I brought out the last 2 bins of slides and negatives. "This one has the shop footage from the 90s, I said, setting the box down gently. Nicole smiled. "The lighting in those old reels is so moody, almost cinematic." She always said things like that. She had a filmmaker's eye. After lunch, she asked if she could get some footage of the garage for a side project she was working on. Just a quiet visual of the space, nothing fancy. Maybe something useful for a future documentary, she said. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Just don't touch the car." She gave a mock salute and went off with her little handheld camera. I went back to the kitchen and washed dishes, the hum of the faucet a small comfort. When she returned, her cheeks were pink from the cold and her brows slightly knit. "Something wrong?" I asked. "Probably nothing, but your camera in the garage doesn't cover the northeast corner, where the old shelving is," she said. I paused. "You sure?" "I always check for blind spots when filming. Just habit. That corner's pretty dark and tight. I only mention it because I saw a few marks on the floor there, like someone dragged something metal." I dried my hands on a towel and walked with her out to the garage. She pointed to the far side, just beyond the storage rack where Raymond kept his welding gear. Sure enough, there were faint scratches across the concrete, arced and clustered, like something heavy had been shifted more than once. I hadn't noticed them before. "I didn't want to mess with it," Nicole said, "but it looked odd." I nodded and thanked her. She packed up soon after, said she'd send me the files in a few days. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the porch light off, staring through the window, my eyes fixed on the garage in the distance. I didn't know what I expected. A figure, a sound, a confirmation of my worst thoughts. But the yard remained still. In the morning, I went to the blind corner Nicole mentioned, pulled everything off the shelves one by one. Boxes of spark plugs, rusted tools, a pair of Raymond's old boots. Then I saw it, or a small black cord tucked behind the lowest beam. I followed it, heart thudding slow and heavy. At the end of the cord was a square black device, a motion sensor, but not one of mine. I knelt and picked it up. The adhesive on the back was fresh, too fresh. I didn't touch anything else. I backed away and closed the garage, then sat on the steps outside for a long while. Eventually I called Henry. Henry had been Raymond's friend since they served in the reserves together. He'd retired last year and now spent his days restoring antique radios. More importantly, he had a quiet sense of clarity. He never rushed to conclusions, never judged. I trusted him. When he arrived, I handed him the device. He turned it over in his palm, brows furrowed. This is modern. Probably connects to a phone app. Someone's been watching. He didn't ask me who. He knew better than to poke at a wound that wasn't ready to open. He helped me install a second camera in the corner, one I controlled. You think I'm being paranoid? I asked as we packed up the tools. Henry shook his head. You're being smart. There's a difference. That evening, I sat in the guest room and checked the drawers again. This time slower, more deliberate. The drawer I'd seen the napkin in was empty now, but under the mattress, I found a small USB stick. No label, no case. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting it to be blank. But there were files, videos, security footage from my own property, dated back nearly 6 weeks, angles I didn't recognize, including the garage, including the hallway to my bedroom. My chest tightened. The file names were numbered, no descriptions. I clicked one at random. It opened to a grainy video of me walking through the kitchen, alone, at night. Another showed the garage. Brittany stepping inside, looking around, kneeling by the Cobra, checking something near the undercarriage. I stopped the video, closed the laptop. The silence around me felt sharp, too sharp. I had no doubt now. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't carelessness. This was deliberate. Someone wanted to break something that couldn't be replaced. And they were starting with me. It was early Sunday morning when I smelled the smoke. I was in the kitchen, pouring water for the tea kettle, when a faint sharpness in the air cut through the scent of lemon balm and wood polish. It wasn't the kind of smoke from a burnt toast or the old furnace acting up. It was acrid, chemical, immediate. I dropped the kettle and ran toward the back of the house. Through the window, over the sink, I could already see it. Dark plumes rising from the garage, curling like ink in water, thick and furious. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed the phone, called for help, and ran outside barefoot. The cold gravel pierced through my heels, but I didn't stop. By the time I reached the garage, the flames had taken hold. Orange and red flickered through the cracks in the wood. The windows on the side had blown out from the heat. Inside, through the black smoke, I saw it. The Shelby Cobra 427, still parked, still beautiful, but being swallowed alive. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. The fire truck arrived fast. Too fast for a rural place like this. Maybe someone else had seen the smoke. Maybe the gods were just mocking me with irony. The firefighters worked quickly, uncoiling hoses, shouting commands, drenching the structure in waves of foam. I stood back, arms wrapped tight around myself, shaking but not cold. Jason came minutes later. He must have heard on the scanner. He pulled up, door still open as he ran toward me. He looked at the garage, then at me. Anyone inside? I shook my head. He didn't speak again, just stood next to me, both of us watching it burn. The fire didn't spread to the house. It died within the garage, leaving behind a skeleton of what had been. Charred beams, melted tools, the outline of the Cobra barely recognizable, twisted metal where a life's work once sat. The fire chief approached me afterward. His face was somber, like a man delivering bad news he already knew I didn't want confirmed. Looks electrical, originated near the back left corner. There's an old fuse box there. I nodded. Yes, but it was inspected last spring. He gave a non-committal shrug. Still, things degrade, especially in older buildings. I nodded again, but my hands were fists behind my back. Later, when the crowd cleared and Jason helped board up the remains, he turned to me. Something's wrong. That fire moved too fast. He had seen the same thing I had. The lines didn't add up. The melt pattern was too focused, too aggressive for something as simple as a fuse box failure. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened the laptop again, inserted the USB I'd hidden behind the bookshelf. I had only watched one clip before. Now I watched them all. One video showed Brittany entering the garage 2 nights before the fire. She stood in the same blind corner Nicole had pointed out, bent down, stayed there for nearly 10 minutes, no audio, no clear detail. But it was her. The way she held her phone, the jacket she wore, the way she touched her hair. Small things only a mother would recognize. The next clip was from the night before. Just a flash, a spark in the darkness. Then the screen went black. Corrupted file. I stared at the blank screen and felt nothing. Not sadness, not even anger, just silence. I sent Jason a message the next morning, told him to meet me at Tammy's. When we arrived, I showed him the video. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Tammy stood at the window, arms crossed. She'd already known, or at least sensed it. I could see it in her eyes. "She's been spiraling for months," Tammy said quietly. "You tried to pretend it would pass. But this isn't just resentment. This is calculated." I nodded. There was no denying it anymore. The next step was painful but necessary. I went to the small safe behind Raymond's bookshelf, took out the binder he had kept labeled Estate Matters. Inside were the original titles, the trust documents, the insurance on the garage, and the Cobra. I didn't cry. Not then. I just set everything on the dining table and flipped through each page like I was reading someone else's life. Each signature, each notarized date, a marker of who we had been and what we had hoped to protect. The last page was a copy of Raymond's handwritten note to me, a simple instruction tucked into the folder 10 years earlier. "If anything ever happens to the Cobra, check the second lockbox." I had forgotten about it, or maybe I had chosen to forget. The second lockbox was smaller, tucked beneath the floorboard in the closet of our bedroom. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside was a letter, addressed to me in his handwriting. It said only one thing: if she tries to destroy what I loved, then she has forfeited the right to inherit what she wants. It wasn't legal instruction, just a sentence, but it was enough. I folded the paper, put it back, and closed the box. That evening, I lit a single candle in the living room and watched it flicker against the quiet walls. The garage was gone. The car was gone. But the truth was clearer now than it had ever been, and I wasn't going to let this pass in silence. 2 days after the fire, I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes were dull, my posture slumped. I looked like a woman grieving a death she saw coming but still couldn't stop. Maybe that was what it was. The death of something sacred, something irreplaceable. The insurance agent came that morning, polite, professional, but quick to glance around the house like he was scanning for inconsistencies. He took notes, asked for documents. I gave him everything. The titles, the appraisals, even the maintenance logs that Jason had updated every year. When he left, I sat in silence for nearly an hour, then called Tammy. I told her to meet me at the library downtown, not at home. I needed neutral ground, somewhere with clean lines and fluorescent lighting, where everything felt more orderly than my living room. She arrived with 2 cups of coffee and that old leather notebook she always carried. We found a quiet corner. I pulled out the USB. "This has videos," I said. "All taken without my knowledge, all from inside my house, my garage, my hallway." Tammy didn't say a word, just waited. I believe Brittany set the fire, I continued. Not just out of rage, but as a message, a power play. She thought I'd give in, sign the condo over to avoid more damage. Tammy leaned forward. You have proof. Enough, I said. Enough to show motive, timeline, presence at the scene. The rest is deduction. She reached into her notebook and handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a printed email. I wasn't going to tell you unless things got worse, she said. But this came to my friend Nicole's inbox last week. Someone pretending to be you, asking for scanned copies of the condo deed and any financial records tied to it. My stomach dropped. The email address was close to mine. One letter changed. She thought it was strange, Tammy added, so she forwarded it to me just in case. My fingers clenched around the paper. Brittany had been trying to access everything behind my back, legally, digitally, silently. I nodded slowly. She's not just angry, she's strategic. That evening, Jason dropped by unannounced. He brought an envelope. Inside were photographs he had printed from the camera feeds, still frames of Brittany entering the garage, standing by the fuel tank, glancing at the door, holding something in her hand. He pointed to one of the photos. I enlarged it. That's an accelerant canister. You can't see the label, but you know what it is. I breathed out through my nose, steady and slow. I'm going to the attorney. Jason nodded. Let me drive you. The next morning, we sat in the office of Ms. Glenda Pearson, the family estate lawyer who had handled Raymond's trust. She had silver hair pulled into a twist and a voice like polished wood. Calm, but strong. I gave her the USB, the photographs, the letter from Raymond I had found in the second lockbox. She read everything twice. When she finished, she looked up and asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I shook my head. Not yet. I want her removed from any future claim. Not just the condo. Everything. I want the trust protected. I want her to know the cost of what she did without dragging this through a courtroom. Ms. Pearson nodded slowly. We can amend the trust directives, and if needed, place legal distance between your assets and any immediate family with documented intent to damage. I want that done immediately. By the time we left, my chest felt lighter. Not because anything had been repaired, but because I had stopped waiting. I had acted. When I returned home, I sat on the porch with the wind tugging at my sleeves. The garage was still boarded up. The air still carried the faint memory of smoke. But inside me, something was shifting. I was no longer just grieving what had been lost. I was beginning to protect what was left. I left before sunrise. There was something about the quiet before dawn that made everything feel softer, less heavy. I packed only what I needed: a folder with legal documents, a small leather bag with essentials, and the worn envelope that held Raymond's final letter. The rest I left behind. Jason met me at the bus depot. He didn't ask where I was going. He just helped me lift my bag onto the curb and gave me a look that held no pity, only respect. I boarded without turning back. The bus rolled out of town, past the lake where the wind still stirred the surface like whispered secrets. I kept my coat tight around me and closed my eyes. I was heading to Indianapolis, not to visit family, not for rest. I had an appointment with a team that Raymond had quietly put together years ago, legal and financial experts who helped structure the Raymond Legacy Trust. It was time to activate the second phase of his plan, the phase he had outlined but never expected me to use. The office was inside a glass building tucked between two downtown towers. I was early, but they were ready. A woman named Celia greeted me. Sharp suit, clear eyes. She was Raymond's go-to for strategic structuring and estate shielding. She gestured me inside, and for the next 2 hours, I reviewed everything. We removed Brittany's name from every trust consideration. We amended contingencies that would otherwise default to next of kin. We reassigned the condo to a non-profit scholarship initiative that had been quietly registered under Raymond's name. By noon, Brittany no longer had any legal or financial pathway to the lakeside apartment. By 1 o'clock, she couldn't access anything tied to the Raymond Whitmore estate. Celia leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. "There's still the matter of public narrative," she said. "What you do next may define how this unfolds long-term." I thought about that on the train ride back. When I got home, the air was cooler, the sky dimmed with an early autumn haze. Tammy met me at the door. Her eyes were alert. "She came by," she said. I didn't need to ask who. Tammy handed me a folded note, Brittany's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Inside, a short sentence. "You're hurting this family. I hope it's worth it." I folded it neatly and placed it in the trash. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. That evening, I walked to the edge of the property, to the tree Raymond had planted the year we were married. The bench underneath was worn from time and weather, but it held. I sat. I thought of all the years we had built things slowly, thoughtfully. The house, the car, the life, and how fast it had all shifted. Not collapsed, but shifted. Brittany had been a bright child, curious, impatient, always pushing for more. I used to think that hunger came from ambition. Now I wasn't so sure. Somewhere along the way, entitlement had replaced gratitude. Expectation had edged out effort, and I had allowed it. For too long, I mistook love for tolerance, mistook silence for strength. I told myself that being patient was the high road, but all it did was clear a path for her to walk further away from the person I had tried to raise. The wind rustled the trees above. Inside the house, I opened the safe once more. I took out the finalized documents, the trust updates, the letters Celia had printed for me to sign. And I did. Every page, with a calm hand and a steady pen. The next morning, I mailed the letters to 3 places: the attorney, the non-profit, and the trust's archive office. When I came back inside, the house felt quieter. Not empty, just clearer. The garage was still a skeleton, but the space beside it, where the ashes had been swept, was open. Jason had cleared the debris without telling me. There was a small note stuck to the fence post. "Let me know when you're ready to build something new." No signature, just those words. I folded the paper and placed it beside Raymond's letter. Maybe I would rebuild. Maybe I wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, the decision felt like mine. Entirely mine. Not swayed by fear, not guided by guilt, but anchored in truth. And that was a beginning, even if it came from fire, even if it rose from ashes, it was still a beginning. It was a Thursday afternoon, quiet and overcast, when Nicole knocked on my door again. She looked nervous. She clutched her phone like it had betrayed her. I invited her in without a word and made us both some tea, though I barely touched mine. "I didn't know what to do," she said, her voice low. I almost deleted it. She turned her phone toward me and hit play. It was a video. Grainy, vertical, the kind kids recorded without thinking. Brittany's voice came through first, clear and sharp, even over the background noise of clinking tools and footsteps. "If I wreck the damn thing," Brittany said, "she'll have no choice but to give me what I want. It's either that or she lets Dad's legacy die in flames. I know her. She won't let that happen." My body went still. Nicole looked at me, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. "Where did you get this?" I asked, careful to keep my voice steady. "I was going through old drafts in my TikTok folder," she said. "It was from the day I filmed the garage. I must have left my camera rolling by accident when I went back inside for my scarf. Brittany must not have known it was on." The timestamp was clear, 2 days before the fire. Nicole had never posted the video. It had just been sitting there, buried under filters and half-edited clips. She had stumbled upon it while backing up her phone. I took a deep breath and hit play again. This time I watched closely. The footage was angled just right, capturing Brittany pacing by the garage door, speaking into her phone, her tone calculated, not emotional, not distressed, cold. I thanked Nicole and told her I'd handle it. She nodded and left, clearly shaken. I waited until the door closed before standing. There was no doubt left, no room for explanation or assumption. She had said it herself. If I wreck the damn thing, I walked to the back room and pulled the updated trust documents from the drawer. Flipped through until I found the emergency clause Celia had inserted, one that allowed for accelerated legal action in the case of confirmed malicious intent. I dialed Glenda's number. She answered on the third ring. "I have new evidence," I said. "This time it's her voice." She didn't ask for details, just told me to send it, then meet her the next morning. She would prepare the filings. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, the weight of it all pressing down. I thought of Brittany as a child, her hair always in braids, asking questions about everything, mimicking Raymond's every move. I had loved her so deeply, had forgiven her so many times. But this was something else. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an outburst. This was intent. And intent has consequences. The next day, I met Glenda downtown. We went through the video together in her conference room. She didn't flinch. "This is admissible," she said. "It meets the burden, and it changes everything." By the time I left, the emergency clause had been triggered. Brittany's rights to the estate were suspended, pending investigation. Access to the condo was blocked. All keys were deactivated. She would be notified within 72 hours. But the damage had already rippled. That evening, Jason called me. He sounded tense. "Check the neighborhood page," he said. I opened my laptop and logged into the Lakeview digital bulletin board. There it was. A post, simple and direct. "Woman caught on tape planning arson against mother's vintage car. TikTok video surfaces." The comments flooded in. Neighbors speculating, locals stunned. Some remembered seeing Brittany around the garage that week. Others claimed they always sensed something was off. It didn't take long before it spread beyond the community. Raymond had been a known name in the classic car world. The story traveled, blogs picked it up. An automotive history forum shared the news. People began asking how a legacy like his could fall into such hands. I didn't share the video. Nicole didn't either. Someone else must have gotten hold of it and posted a snippet. By Saturday, Brittany showed up. She didn't knock. She just stood at the edge of the yard, hands trembling at her sides, eyes red from crying or fury. I couldn't tell. "You think this fixes anything," she shouted, "but all it does is ruin me." I stood still on the porch. She walked closer. "You let everyone think I'm some monster," she hissed. "You let them believe it. I was desperate. I didn't mean to go that far." I didn't speak. She searched my face, looking for softness, an opening, a sign that I might fold like I always had. But I didn't. "I needed that condo," she whispered. "You know I did." I let the silence hold. She shook her head like she couldn't understand how she had lost control of me. like I had betrayed some unspoken agreement that she could always push, and I would always absorb it. She turned and walked away, slower than she came. When she was gone, I stepped back inside and closed the door. No lock, no force, just the quiet click of choosing peace. That was the first time I felt it. Not sadness, not victory, but release. The morning of the car exhibition arrived with a crisp bite in the air. I hadn't planned on attending at first, but Jason had insisted. He said it would be good for people to see that I still showed up, that I still stood for something, even after the garage, the fire, and all that followed. I pulled my hair back, wore a long wool coat, and packed only one thing into my handbag: a small sealed envelope that had stayed hidden in Raymond's safe for more than a decade. One I had never opened until last week. The exhibition took place in a vast field at the edge of town, where once a year, car enthusiasts gathered to display their rarest machines. This year, there was no Cobra, no shimmer of midnight blue under sunlight, only its absence. And yet people still came. I arrived just before the opening remarks. Familiar faces greeted me with soft nods. They didn't speak about the fire, but I could feel it in their eyes. Some offered condolences. Others simply stood close, silently acknowledging what had been lost. I walked past the tents and tables until I reached the stage area. A folding chair with my name was placed near the front, but I stayed standing. When the microphone crackled to life, the organizer spoke briefly about Raymond, about his work, his precision, the way he treated every bolt like it carried a soul. I listened, heart quiet, until he paused and looked toward me. "And today," he said, "Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore has asked to share a few words, in memory of her husband and of something far greater than just a car." I stepped up slowly. The podium felt taller than I remembered from years past. The crowd hushed. I looked out over them, then down at the envelope in my hand. "This," I began, "is a letter my husband wrote 15 years ago. He wrote it after the first time someone tried to buy the Shelby. They offered nearly $1 million. He refused." I opened the envelope and removed the letter, yellowed and folded in 3. My hands didn't shake. I haven't read this aloud before, but I think today it belongs to more than just me. I began to read. "To my wife, Eleanor. If you are reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. Maybe the car was damaged. Maybe it's gone. And if it is, I'm not angry. But I need you to know something. This car is not just steel. It's not just paint or horsepower. It's our story. It's the weekends we spent tuning it. The summers we drove with no destination. The argument we had in '83 when you made me repaint the hood. It's everything." I paused, letting the words settle. He continued, "If anyone, family or not, damages it on purpose, with greed in their heart, then I ask you to let them go, not with anger, but with clarity, because someone who destroys what another person loves has already removed themselves from the right to inherit that love." I folded the letter and looked up. I won't name names. That isn't what this moment is for. But I will say this. Raymond's words weren't written in bitterness. They were written in protection, not just for the car, but for what it stood for. The audience was silent. A few heads bowed. Others just looked at me, steady and still. "Today," I said, "I'm establishing something new, the Raymond Whitmore Fellowship, funded by the very assets Brittany tried to manipulate. It will help young women studying mechanics, engineering, and design, women who will build, not burn, who will preserve, not possess." There was a ripple of reaction then, not applause, just something quieter, deeper. agreement. When I stepped down, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something firmer, anchored. Jason found me near the concession tent later. He handed me a small folded note. No return address. Just my name in rushed ink. I opened it. It was from Brittany. "You win. I hope it's worth losing your only daughter." I tucked it into my coat pocket and said nothing, because the truth was, I hadn't won anything. There was no prize in this, no satisfaction in being right, just the heavy, quiet ache of doing what had to be done. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the field began to empty, I walked back to the stage. No one was around. I stood beneath the tent and looked out over the grass, listening to the wind. I could almost hear the Cobra's engine, phantom-like, growling across the horizon. And then I whispered softly, just to myself. I kept my promise. That was enough. The following week unfolded like a slow-moving storm. No thunder, no lightning, just a steady pressure building from the weight of exposure. The video, once quietly shared, had now spread far beyond our small town. The automotive forums had picked it up first, then a few local news stations. By Monday, a regional outlet ran a headline that made my stomach drop. "Daughter of classic car designer caught on tape planning destruction of priceless vehicle." They didn't use Brittany's name, but it didn't matter. Anyone who knew our family could connect the dots. And Brittany, well, she made it worse for herself. Instead of retreating or staying silent, she fired back online. A long post on her social media page painted herself as misunderstood, blamed stress, grief, even accused me of withholding her rightful inheritance. The post was taken down within hours, but the internet had already done what it does best. It screenshotted, spread, and commented. People weren't kind. The remarks ranged from disbelief to outright disgust. Some accused her of manipulating a grieving mother. Others speculated that she'd burned the car to increase her odds of inheritance, calling it calculated and cruel. But what hit Brittany hardest wasn't the strangers online. It was the silence from people she once called friends. Tammy told me that Brittany had tried organizing a small get-together with some local families. No one showed. Her phone calls went unanswered, her inbox ignored. At the grocery store, I saw her from a distance one afternoon. Her posture was different, shoulders hunched, chin tucked. She used to walk with her phone in hand, always half smiling at a screen. That day, she kept her eyes on the floor. She didn't see me, and I didn't call out. I returned home to find a letter waiting on my porch. No envelope this time. Just 3 folded pages held together with a ribbon that looked like it had once been wrapped around a gift. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Her words were messy, uneven, rushed in places, overly rehearsed in others. She said she never meant for things to go that far, that she just wanted the condo because it felt like the last thing she had of Dad. That maybe she had said things she didn't mean, done things out of panic, out of fear. She wrote that she was sorry if I felt hurt, but I should understand that the world was different now, and maybe I didn't know what pressure looked like from her side of the line. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a justification wrapped in soft words. I folded the pages and placed them in the drawer beside Raymond's letter. Not as a keepsake, not as forgiveness, but as a record. A few days later, the school where I'd once volunteered asked me to speak at a community luncheon. They wanted to honor Raymond's contribution to the trust that now helped several of their students access technical programs and certifications. I accepted quietly, showed up early, and sat in the second row. They spoke of legacy, of the idea that what we leave behind isn't just money or objects, but values. I listened, my hands folded in my lap, thinking of all the ways Raymond had taught that through action, not lectures. At the end of the event, a young woman approached me. Her name was Desiree. She had oil under her nails and a wide smile. She said she'd received a grant from the Raymond Whitmore Fellowship and was now in her second year of mechanics training. She showed me photos of the project she was building, a custom motorcycle from salvaged parts. "You're the reason I didn't quit," she said. When I heard the story, I thought, if that lady could walk away from all that and still give back, then maybe I could stay in school one more year. Her words hit me deeper than I expected, because I hadn't felt like I was giving back. I had felt like I was surviving, rebuilding what I could from rubble. But maybe, in the process, I had offered something more than just a quiet reaction to pain. Maybe I had built a shelter. Later that evening, I walked the perimeter of my property. Leaves scattered the lawn. The garage, still under repair, was quieter now, half painted and half open to the sky. And as I stood there, a thought rose from somewhere deeper than memory. Brittany had burned the car to gain control, but what she'd actually done was light a fire that revealed everything she'd been hiding. And in that revelation, I had finally seen clearly. This wasn't about loss anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about reclaiming the space where silence had lived too long, and choosing, at last, to fill it with truth. By mid-autumn, the air had turned colder, sharper, and everything outside began to shift in colour and tone. The trees along Lakeview Lane had already started dropping their leaves, creating soft trails of gold and rust across the sidewalks. I found myself waking earlier each day, not out of anxiety or dread anymore, but something quieter, a rhythm, a habit of stillness. I began spending more time at the vocational training centre just outside of town. It wasn't a large place, barely 2 wings and a gravel parking lot, but it was alive with movement. Girls in grey coveralls worked on engines with their sleeves rolled up, grease on their arms, fierce focus in their eyes. The Raymond Whitmore Fellowship now supported 6 of them, 6 stories, 6 chances at a life different from what had been handed to them. I didn't say much while I was there, just swept floors, handed tools, and occasionally sat in the back office helping organize donated manuals. No one treated me like the founder or benefactor, and I liked it that way. There was one girl, Maureen, who reminded me of Brittany when she was young. She had the same impatient energy, the same sharp glance when she felt misunderstood. But Maureen listened. She asked questions. She stayed late without being told. One day, after class, she sat beside me while I folded donation forms. "I used to think rich people didn't care," she said without looking up, "that they just threw money around to feel better." I didn't reply, just nodded once. "But this place," she added, "it feels different. Like someone thought ahead. Like someone knew we'd be here one day." I looked over at her and she shrugged. "I guess that's what matters, right? That someone thought we were worth saving." Later, I found myself sitting alone in the half-finished garage at home. Jason had repainted the interior walls, and the concrete had been freshly sealed. The shelves Raymond once lined with polished tools now stood empty, but somehow still carried his presence. Not the items, the intention, the order. I stood in the center of the room, closed my eyes, and pictured the Cobra, the shape of it, the sound it made rolling down the driveway, the way Raymond would always place his palm on the hood, like greeting an old friend. I didn't cry. The fire had taken the car, but not the man, not the values, not the care. And those were what I was trying to pass on now. One afternoon, I received a letter from the Historical Auto Association. They were dedicating a page in their journal to Raymond's legacy, and had requested a short statement from me. I sat down that night and wrote by hand, just as I had watched Raymond do so many times. I wrote about devotion, about meticulousness, about the way a person could pour themselves into a thing and leave behind more than just an object. I ended the letter with something I had never said out loud. He loved that car because it reminded him of freedom, but he loved people more, even those who forgot how to love him back. I mailed it without a second draft. Brittany hadn't tried to contact me again since the last letter. The silence between us had settled into something fixed, unmoving. I hadn't told anyone, but I had removed her name from my estate entirely. Not out of revenge, not even to punish, but because something had finally shifted. I had spent too many years believing that love required endurance, that to be a good mother meant bearing the full weight of someone else's brokenness without question. But now, I understood that sometimes love required distance. It required the courage to let someone walk away, even when every memory inside you begged them to stay. And in that space, I had begun to breathe again. I stood at the edge of the property one evening, watching the sun lower itself behind the lake. The wind had picked up, tugging at the sleeves of my coat. For a moment, I thought I heard an engine in the distance. Not the Cobra, just another car heading down the road. But I let myself imagine, because what remained now wasn't loss, it was choice. And I had finally learned how to make one for myself. It was late spring when I returned to the old car show grounds, not as a speaker or a guest of honor, just as myself. The grass had grown wild around the faded lines of the old parking rows. A few birds skittered through the field, and the lake beyond still held that stillness I remembered from last year. I carried no bags, no letters, no speeches, only a single folding chair and a small thermos of coffee. I set the chair near where the stage had once stood and sat facing the empty field, listening to the wind drift through the cottonwoods. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking of what was lost. I wasn't thinking of the car, or the garage, or even Brittany. I was thinking of what it meant to stay, to remain present, even when everything had tried to push me towards silence. Raymond's words came back to me then, not the ones in the letter. The ones he used to say after a long day of building, when the shop was finally quiet. We don't restore something because it's perfect. We restore it because it matters. I breathed in slow and deep, let it settle in my chest. A few minutes later, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I didn't turn right away. I didn't need to. I knew it was Brittany. She stopped a few feet back, standing just out of the light. I didn't speak. She didn't either. We just sat in the silence for a moment that stretched too long to be casual, but not long enough to be called peace. Then she stepped forward, eyes red, mouth set like stone. She held something in her hand. It was a small photo, faded, of me and Raymond standing beside the Cobra the day it came home. She had kept it all these years, tucked away, maybe forgotten, maybe not. She extended it without a word. I reached up and took it gently. There was no apology, no explanation, and I didn't ask for either. I simply nodded once, small, barely visible. But she saw it. She left without another word. And that was enough. I stayed until the sky turned gold, then packed my chair and walked slowly back to the car. My hands were steady, my breath even. At home, I placed the photo in a small frame on the mantel, not in the center, off to the side, quiet, like the memory itself. Some endings aren't loud. They don't come with closure or celebration. Some just arrive, gently, and settle into place like the last piece of a puzzle you didn't know was missing. And when they do, you don't fight them. You just let them be. Because sometimes the most powerful answer is silence. If you've ever held on to something that mattered deeply, even when others didn't understand, I think you'll know how it feels to let go without losing yourself. This story might reflect a quiet kind of strength, one that doesn't scream, but still stands. If you've lived through something like this, or even just felt echoes of it in your own family, I'd love to hear how you found peace. Your voice matters more than you think. Let's talk in the comments, gently, like friends who've been through storms.